Good morning and welcome to this morning's executive. As you'll see, we've moved home, but due to the election duties, the committee room is taken up. It's a bit of an unusual setup, but I'm sure we will accommodate accordingly. Do we have any apologies?
Apologies for Councillor Coombs, Convener.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? No. We have two supplementary agendas. One is in relation to a deputation in relation to item 15, and I have to ask committee, are we happy to hear the deputation? Yep. I would propose, as it's on a single issue, that they be given 10 minutes and then up to 10 minutes for questions after that. Would we be content with that? Okay, they're not here yet, but obviously we'll advise them of the approval when they do appear. The other supplementary agenda is in relation to the minute of the executive on the 29th of October. There was an amendment to the published papers because it was inaccurate, and just to make people aware of that, and that will be what we move to next. So the minute of the meeting of the 29th of October, as amended in the supplementary agenda, are we happy to accept? Yes. Content to accept? Thank you. Okay, item 4 is the rolling action log. There is one error in the rolling action log that wasn't updated. Item 478, which is the motion on the climate emergency. That paper had intended to come to this meeting. However, there was some additional information that was required to be updated due to various things. I don't know, Mrs. Geisler, do you want to make any other comment in relation to that?
Not really, Convener. Yes, there is a study ongoing just now, the outcome of which we thought would be helpful for the report, so we'd rather bring it to January on that basis, so members can be better informed. Okay.
Convener, I'm just wondering when that report will be coming forward then?
January.
It's definitely January.
Yes, it was January, yes.
Right.
It was just, and the information that we anticipated wasn't ready, and it would make an enhancement to the actual report and give people a more rounded view. So apologies for that. It was almost ready to go, but felt it was more appropriate to wait. Okay.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning. The report for members this morning picks up on 4 items that were discussed at the last Corporate Partnership Forum, which met on the 6th of November. And the 4 items which were discussed and have been referred to you for consideration this morning relate to 3 items in relation to changes in policy, changes to dignity at work policy, wellbeing and mental health policy, and how to prevent, minimise and manage stress at work. And a number of these items will be familiar to members because we spoke about wellbeing at our last meeting. In addition to these updates on the 3 policies, we are also asking you to note the costs and savings associated with voluntary severance and ill health retireals in the period for 2018-19. And for those members who were on JCC, you may recall that this report came to JCC when JCC was in its existence. Section 4 of the report just gives members a brief description of the updates that have been made to each of the policies, consistent with the revision of policies, and members will remember this. What we're trying to do is trying to disseminate decision making within the organisation. So we're now asking for approval for formal investigation report to be considered by service managers and at head teacher level. Hopefully that will minimise delays in the system. We give details of the work positive stress risk assessment tool, which has been introduced. I don't think there's anything else convenient I want to say in relation to the referral from the Corporate Partnership Forum. The recommendations are set out for members to consider at section 2.1 of the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. As an executive, we've been asked to approve the immediate implementation changes to dignity work policy, wellbeing and mental health policy, and how to prevent and minimise stress at work. There are no costs and savings achieved from the voluntary service and ill health arrangements for the period, and that was what was asked for by committee. It's undergone scrutiny by the Partnership Forum, and they're content from the trade union aspect. So can I ask members to approve? Thank you. Councillor
Convener,
Nimmo?
it was just a question in relation to the managing the stress at work. Has there been an increase in stress-related absence due to the increased workloads that have been placed on staff?
Mr Ritchie?
Thanks. If you look at the stress-related absence that's identified on absence, it is typically around 10%, and it's remained around 10%. Sometimes it fluctuates on a month-to-month basis, but typically it's been around 10%. I suppose the other thing to say about stress, and we spoke about this the last time as well, is that stress is a complicated matter, so there can be more than one issue which triggers stress-related absence.
Councillor
I think it was Councillor Reid first. Well, thanks, Convener. These are comprehensive policies, and I read through them. And I'd just like to ask, how do we measure the effectiveness of these policies? Is there a further discussion with unions and staff to see if the policies are... It's great having the policies, but how do we measure the effectiveness?
Thanks. Councillor Bissett's correct. It's an issue which is discussed on a regular basis with trade unions. It's an issue which is discussed on a regular basis at management teams across the council, and we've got our absence management statistics which identify the reasons for absence, so we can keep a check on that through that particular route as well.
I think also the biannual staff survey will assist in helping measure where there's movement in this, along with other areas, and that's something that's been kind of hardwired into what we do as part of our process.
But they are brilliant policies, you know.
Councillor Reid?
Yes, it's just a general point. It relates to this item, but it relates to the other items. On Wednesday, we got 260 pages put into our locker. That's a good sized book. And I notice in this case, for example, just for an example, there are the actual forms to be used by employees and so on. Officers seem to be increasingly not using background papers to which members can refer, instead inserting them in the actual agenda. There are various examples on this agenda, for example. We just don't have the time to look at these, to be honest. I think I speak on behalf of most people when I say that. Could I urge that either executive summaries are used or background papers in future, especially given that we had a council meeting last Wednesday and people are busy with other things at the moment. It's a bit much to be asked to read 260 pages.
I fully understand where you're coming from, and having also had an integrated joint board which had over 500 pages last week. I think we are still trying to get a balance of how to present the papers and giving members the information they're looking for. There's far more used by way of electronic links now than we have before, but I think it was to be able to highlight what the policy is and what's available. But all of these are available on the internet, Mr Ritchie, yeah. And staff are encouraged to go to look there. If members would prefer that we are just given the links, and if we wish to go into any depth to go and look at those, then we can certainly take that on board if that's what members want.
I know the officers put a lot of work into the reports, and if members don't have the time to read them, then that work really goes to waste.
I appreciate that. Okay, we'll have another look at how we can manage that. Councillor Boyce.
Thank you, Convener. Given that the services and trade unions have been consulted on this, I think that's an excellent way to go forward. One of the things, and I sort of lean on personal experience of having to do a number of investigations over the years, I think it's good that we're putting in additional people, because sometimes time's the enemy when you do investigations, because things move and things change. I think that's a very, very positive thing here, is that things will be able to get dealt with a lot quicker, in support, obviously, of this report.
Okay, thank you. Any other member? No? Okay, happy to accept. Okay, item 6 is the referral from the Scrutiny Committee, the report on the Scrutiny Panel housing allocations.
Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie.
Yes, thank you. Convener, members will be aware that a scrutiny panel was established to look at our housing allocations system. Details of the meetings that were held of the panel are set out on page 63 of the agenda, of which there were 6 meetings of the panel, and information on the evidence that was provided to the panel is set out in section 4.1 of the report, and included within these 6 meetings was a meeting where all elected members were invited to give their comments on existing scheme. The Scrutiny Committee, having considered the report from the panel, have made 7 recommendations to the Executive for your consideration, and the 7 recommendations are set out in section 2.1 of the report. I don't plan to go through the 7 recommendations because I think they're fairly straightforward and self-explanatory. Section 2.2 of the recommendations picks up on the fact that there's a need to do further consultation with our tenants and residents on the recommendations that come out of today. So a further look as far as consultations is concerned. We're required to have a minimum 6-week period for consultation. Our intention would be not to start that consultation period with tenants and residents until probably the middle of December to get Christmas and New Year out of the road. And the recommendation is that, having considered the feedback from that consultation, that the scrutiny panel, along with the portfolio holder, consider the outcome of that consultation and then make further recommendations based on that feedback to the Executive for your consideration. Recommendations can be in section 2 of the report for members this morning.
Thank you. We have the convener of the Scrutiny Committee here. I don't know whether the convener would wish to say anything or add anything to the report. Councillor Patrick, do you want to speak? No. Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Hughes.
Well, thank you, Convener. This report is a referral from the Scrutiny Committee following the conclusion of the Scrutiny Panel review of the housing allocations policy. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge and commend the Scrutiny Panel for their deliberations, research and the investigative process which has been undertaken, from which wide-ranging recommendations have been collated. The Scrutiny Committee has recommended to the Executive 2 recommendations. The first is that 7 sections highlighting, for example, and including local letting initiative high flats, local letting initiative new builds, letting quotas be given out for consultation. This recommendation I fully support. Recommendation 2 requests that the Scrutiny Panel, along with the portfolio holder, reviews the outcome of the consultation in regard to the recommendations prior to final consideration by the Executive. I would prefer that this consultation comes back to the Executive and that the outcome of the consultation should be reviewed by the Executive. Although I am appreciative of the sentiment expressed in recommendation 2 that I be involved in reviewing the outcome of this consultation along with the scrutiny panel, the normal procedure, my understanding is that the normal procedure is that consultations come back to the Executive. Therefore, I am proposing an amendment to this report with regards to recommendation 2. My amendment requests that the outcome of the consultation comes back to the Executive and that the Executive reviews the outcome of the consultation. I've also given Jack a wee copy of my amendment if required.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Bissett?
Thank you, Convener. I would just like to echo Councillor Hughes' sentiments and congratulate and commend the scrutiny panel for their excellent work on the report. I just wondered if, when the consultation comes back, if there will be an opportunity for all elected members to have some input to that. I know it's going to come back to the Executive, but would there still be an opportunity for all elected members to have some input to that consultation or comment on it?
Certainly elected members would have the opportunity to comment when it comes back to the Executive, because it's now moved from the scrutiny into the policy domain, and that's where the decisions actually come from. So I think until we see the outcome of that consultation, and there may well be amendments that come forward on that, I think the ability to share the consultation with members is still there, but it should be fed into the Executive as a policy making body. Councillor Garner.
Just happy to second the amendment and agree with the report.
Okay, thank you. Any other member? Councillor Reid.
Do you have an idea of the timescale for the consultation?
Mr Ritchie.
Thanks, Convener. If we start in the middle of January, 6 weeks, give us a couple of weeks at the end of that, collate the information that comes back from that. So I guess that we're looking at something towards the end of March, April time to come back to the Executive.
It's just, as you know, that there are potentially thousands of people who may respond to this particular consultation.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons that I didn't want to put too many additional stages in this process, that the outcome of the consultation really needs to inform the policy, but it's already taken over a year from when we first started this process, or certainly it's nearly 2 years from we initiated the process, and saying that we wanted to look at the allocations policy, and I'm just very aware of that. And as a result, the service has been kind of stymied and been able to take forward changes until we get the outcome from members.
To be honest and frank, there are going to be new houses available in March, quite a number, and it doesn't matter if the policy will apply before that happens or after it happens.
Well,
if
that's
it is applied.
absolutely. That's been one of the dilemmas. Mr Ritchie, do you want to comment anything about that? Because there may be a change as a result of the policy to the allocation of new properties. What would be the delay time in approving the policy and going forward?
I think we'll be looking to, consistent with all the policies that we bring up, is to introduce the policy as soon as the committee agree that revised policy.
I think the race is on then, isn't it?
It is. Okay. Any other member? Happy to agree? Okay, thank you. Item 7 is the construction charter. I think that's with Mr Ritchie as well.
It is again, thank you. The development of construction charters is a trade union campaign across all local authorities in the UK and aims to set minimum standards and conditions and expectations from construction companies who tender for contracts in the public sector. Unite, the trade union, have been leading this campaign from the trade union perspective. The Falkirk Council construction charter before you today is based on the Unite document, but takes into account local and operational matters relating to our own council. The draft of the construction charter is attached to Appendix 1. A number of councils have already introduced construction charters, and half a dozen or so of these at section 3.3 of the report. The objectives of a construction charter are set out for members in section 4.1, so it's about promoting the highest possible standards, promoting direct and secure employment, promoting quality apprenticeships and opportunities for local workers, guaranteeing the highest possible health and safety standards, and encouraging and supporting the role of trade unions. The construction charter, in general terms, sets out for those companies who are interested in tendering for work from Falkirk Council what our expectations are of them as contractors and organisations. So you will see in the construction charter the fact that we have set out what our expectations are, and that's because in procurement law there are a number of things that we can't oblige contractors to do, but we can include some of these items in our evaluation criteria, but we can compel something around promoting trade union roles within the organisation. We can't compel a contractor to do that, but we would encourage them to do that. And as I say, that's the kind of general theme which runs through the construction charter over what the expectations are of a contractor who wants to work with Falkirk Council. So recommendations, convener, are set out in section 2.1 of the report. Happy to answer any questions members have.
Okay, thank you, Mr Ritchie. Councillor Boyce.
Thank you, convener. Can I firstly thank Unite for their work on this? I think it's very important. I've got a bit of experience in working with the type of documents we're looking at. But why have a construction charter? It is to set out the highest standards in construction projects funded by public money, promotes direct and secure employment, and very importantly, promotes apprenticeships and opportunities for local workers, which I know a number of members have spoke about over the years, guarantees the highest possible health and safety standards, and that is actually very, very important when you're talking about construction. The level of incidents in construction, particularly the word deaths, is so much lower now than what it was many, many years ago when I started my apprenticeship, which may have been about 35 years ago. So these things are so important, and it's good that we are leading from that. The environmental sustainability, social sustainability, local economic development. It also allows councils, and I think Stuart had covered slightly, to assess tenderers in respect of the payment of the Scottish Living Wage, which unfortunately cannot be mandated as a number of bits can. I would also particularly note in this that procurement legislation will always take precedence over the Charter in order to mitigate legal challenges. We would not have to want to pay somebody for something that they could not do in the first place. I suppose like ferry services from companies that don't have actually any ferries. With this, I totally agree on this and recommend the recommendations in this.
Thank you, Councillor
I would like to
Boyce.
formally second.
Right, thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Bissett.
Convener, I would just like to publicly acknowledge the input from Unite and commend them on their national campaign. And I think it's a very comprehensive charter and I fully support it. So I really just wanted to minute the input from Unite. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it demonstrates good practice and a lot of what was already in there, Falkirk Council already doing, hence the reason it's very easy just to be able to implement this charter and give that security to us as an authority and indeed to the staff. Councillor Alexander.
I would like to associate myself with both Councillor Bissett's comments and your own. It shouldn't be ignored the fact that Falkirk Council's own policies deliver much of what's contained within this report. So it'd be useful to see a summary of what's in, what's out, and I think we'll find that we already operate most of the practices that Unite are looking for. But there's certainly no harm in every bit good in reviewing these on a regular basis and making sure that they're fit for purpose. So with that, Convener, can I apologise for the inappropriate mode of dress this morning, but...
The training shoes.
Aye. But I'm sure you'll appreciate that they don't want to frighten the wains. But coming back to the report, the first class in terms of what the content is, first class in terms of what our practices are as well.
Thank you for that, Councillor Alexander. And it's good to see you've been able to come along today, considering the events of the last week. And I'm sure everybody wishes you well in your recovery from your surgery.
Thanks very much, Convener. I'll just sneak out.
Item 8 is the tenant and customer participation strategy. Mr Ritchie?
Yeah, thanks. Our members may recall that back in May of this year you approved a corporate participation and engagement strategy. Like so many things associated with housing is required to have its own arrangements in place. So before you this morning is the tenant and customer participation strategy for 2019 through to 2022 as it relates to housing and its customers. We set out at section 3.3 of the report the fact that our tenant participation strategy has been awarded silver accreditation in 2016 and that accreditation approved to gold status in 2019, and last week we picked up an award for our participation strategy nationally, which is excellent for the team. Section 3.4 of the report reminds members what the objectives were of the strategy that ran from 2016 through to 2019, and then we go on to talk about the new strategy. One of the things that we would like to try and do as part of our new strategy is explore digital ways of engagement with our tenants and our customers. That's not to say that the only way we're going to engage is on a digital basis, but we would like to see if we can explore opportunities to enhance digital engagement. Section 4 of the report just gives some examples for members on how our tenants and customers are already involved in the way that the division works. So we've got representatives on the Housing Asset Management Plan group. They participate in focus groups around, for example, how your rent money is spent, and they're also in the editorial panel of the tenants talking, participate in a number of scrutiny panels. Final thing I think to say, Convener, is that in terms of tenant satisfaction, section 4.2 of the report, based on the last tenant satisfaction survey, we've got 93% of our tenants who are satisfied with the opportunity to participate, and 95% saying that they're satisfied with the way that they're kept informed by their landlord, and that was based on a survey of face-to-face engagement with 1,000 of our tenants undertaking a private organisation. And with that, the recommendations, Convener, are set out for elected members in section 2 of the report.
Thank you, Stuart. And can I just firstly say, can you take the committee's thanks back to the staff, and congratulations on winning the award. I think that demonstrates the commitment to tenant participation, the fact that we have been successful and not just been nominated, but in receiving a national award. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Thank you, Convener. As you will see from the report, housing services are heavily regulated through legislation. Within Appendix 1, the evolution of the tenant and customer participation strategy over many years is highlighted. How the strategy has been built on previous practice and how tenant feedback influences decision-making within the service. But above all, previous good practice can give a practical insight into the workings of the department. Tenants are currently involved in the Housing Asset Management Plan, focus groups, scrutiny panels and approved publications through the editorial panel. Also, I have attended the Tenant and Residents Forum. In September, I, along with other elected members, attended Housing Services and Development Services Celebrating Communities, Neighbourhood and Estates Awards event. An excellent event which demonstrated the extent of volunteer involvement within our services. Also, we should also note that the previous tenant participation strategy was recognised by the Tenant Participation Advisory Service, TPAS, and awarded silver accreditation in 2016 and improved to gold accreditation in 2019. Although tenants and residents are involved in many decision-making processes, volunteer involvement shapes the way forward, and we should also recognise that the outcome of volunteer involvement has an impressive impact across the whole of the Falkirk Council area. I commend this strategy to committee and ask that the recommendation as set out in section 2.1 is accepted by the Executive Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Garner.
Happy to second my colleague, Councillor Hughes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Convener. I think while this is a statutory obligation on the Council, it's very clear from the awards, silver and then gold in 2019, the magazine which I enjoy reading when it arrives and which the tenants seem to enjoy too, all speak to a strategy that really works and which is in many ways a gold standard for how we communicate in other areas of the Council too. And I'm particularly drawn to page 125 where it talks about how people can participate, and it gives a huge list of how people can join in. And I think in other areas of the Council we should take note and cognizance of this and do something similar so we can engage with people in other areas of the Council too, in things like leisure services and other elements, in order to make people realise that they can volunteer and they can contribute and they can have some say in what the Council is doing. And I think in many ways it provides a blueprint for how we can improve our customer satisfaction with the people in our community.
Okay, thank you. Any other member? Councillor Reid.
The budget for housing tenant participation was raised from 50,000 to 125. Did that come from the housing revenue account?
Understanding. Secretary.
It does, yes.
Yeah. It's just that increasingly, although Councillor Hughes was careful to use the word tenants, we see the reference to tenants and customers, which presumably include owner-occupiers of former council houses. And I just wondered how they were involved in spending the money to which they didn't contribute.
I don't know whether Stuart or you're able to.
Owner-occupiers can be involved in a number of areas. So I mentioned, for example, one of the groups that we have is how your rent money is spent. Owner-occupiers are not involved in that. If we have a group which is established to look at repairs, then owner-occupiers can be involved in that because you can have communal repairs where they have a share of communal repairs in that. So it is a kind of horses for courses in this, where owner-occupiers are involved, where they have an interest in this, but where they don't have an interest, they tend not to be involved.
I suppose there's an element of that's in the interest of some of our tenants to have involvement of owner-occupiers, particularly where we have a mixed tenure block around capital works, so that there maybe is some benefit there that could be seen for using the revenue account and doing some of that engagement. Councillor Reid?
Could I say equally welcome Councillor Alexander's return? There was something missing last week from the council and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And I think we missed the Bonnie Fechter that usually sits in that corner. So welcome back, David.
Okay, any other member happy to agree? Agreed, thank you. Item 9 is around funeral poverty. This was as a result of a notice of motion. And Mrs Geisler, are you going to take
Yes,
this?
thank you, Convener. Yes, as you say, this report follows on a discussion held at the Executive earlier this year, this is our offering as a consequence of that. The issue of funeral poverty is one in which there's an increasing focus. A number of local authorities, including our own, are considering how this can effectively be tackled, and also Scottish Government are taking steps to take action in respect of this as well. Looking at these in some sort of order, the national measures, the members will be aware that there are a number of national initiatives to offer assistance in respect of bereaved families. The most recent and probably the most significant of these is the funeral support payment, which has recently been introduced by Scottish Government, but there are a number of other avenues of support through the Social Security network, and these are described in paragraph 4.1, top of page 140. The funeral support payment that I mentioned is a significant support, and it's been calculated that there are likely to be 40% more people eligible for this than were previously the case. Paragraph 4.4 shows how that will apply in Scotland for those who are eligible. We also have an initiative within the Council of the Future Project in respect of our own bereavement services to improve the service, make them more efficient, and thus that will have an impact overall on the cost for families using the service. There are other things that we're doing within the council. We have a direct cremation which has been recently introduced. This is a much limited service. It involves a cremation, but there's no particular service in the crematorium, unlike your normal cremation. And this has been used since we introduced this 33 times, as we say in paragraph 4.7. We also have assisted funerals. We have a duty to ensure that funeral arrangements are made for people who are indigent and are unable to, where their families are unable, or there are no families in a position to pay for a funeral. As you can see from the table in paragraph 4.11, these have gone up in recent years, but we do think that's probably associated with the fact that the new hospital is opened in the Forth Valley Hospital is opened, and so there will be people who previously may have passed away in Stirling and Clacks who are now passing away in Falkirk area. We use our direct cremation service for these assisted burials. There are other councils who are initiating some initiatives, and these are there's some of these detailed in Appendix 2 to the report. These are initiatives that we are hoping to explore further as part of our project that I've referred to, and also we want to engage more fully with the bereavement sector to see if there are other things that we can develop locally. So the recommendations in paragraph 2, Convener, and these are to note the terms of the report. We also think that we could update our website, make that better for people, pointing them in the direction of assistance that's available to them, but also, as I say, engage with the bereavement sector and with other local authorities to see how we can roll out some further improvements to this, and obviously we can report back to members as required.
Thank you, Mrs Geisler. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you to Mrs Geisler. Falkirk does a lot to assist people and ensure funerals are affordable. It's really important to consider our existing fees and charges as a starting point, and in this regard Falkirk Council is already relatively cheap in comparison with other council areas and has to stay competitive. We really welcome the Scottish Government's new social security payment system, which I understand began in September, as that is the best way that will target financial help to those most in need at such a difficult time for families. Let's be clear, this new payment system is out of our normal bereavement services role. This is a new social security payment system that the Scottish Fiscal Commission, who are responsible for producing the independent forecasts for divulged social security expenditure, forecasts that a number of people who will be eligible for the new funeral expense assistance will be around 40% higher than those eligible under the previous scheme. This surely is the best way to assist those most in need than a postcode lottery for people around the country. It therefore makes sense to wait to see whether any assessment of the new social security payment system has worked before considering further action at local level. It's also important to note that the other Scottish councils schemes listed in the appendices as other models out there, such as Stirling or the Ayrshire councils, are councils who do not run cremation systems like Falkirk, whose base prices are often higher than ours, and these schemes were introduced before the new Scottish Government social security payment system was introduced. However, we are not complacent. There are already lots of changes going on in Falkirk Council bereavement services. It is also important to recognise the major service improvements that have and continue to take place in the Council's bereavement service, with the upgrades to the crematorium and the work taking place via the Council of the Future project. These measures will benefit all parts of the service, including those in most need. It is important that engagement is carried out with other bodies in the bereavement sector to identify any further local opportunities to assist with funeral poverty. I look forward to seeing the results of this engagement when it is reported back to members for consideration next year. Meanwhile, we will also update our web pages to reflect the new payment system, both bereavement and benefit web pages, as Mrs Geyser alluded to. I welcome that we will update the information supplied via Council's bereavement services and benefits web pages to maximise linkages to other sources of help for the bereaved, including Social Security Scotland, Scottish Government publications and planning, Your Own Local Funeral, and other sources of financial help and advice available from third sector organisations. I think this is the last time you'll see me in here without glasses on. Really struggling now. Happy to note the report.
Okay, thank you. Vanity's a dreadful thing. Councillor Bowes.
Can I formally second and reserve the right to come back in?
Thank you. Councillor Bissett.
Thank you, Convener. I was glad to see this report coming forward following Councillor Black's motion, and it's a comprehensive report, and it's, I'll just say it's heading in the right direction. And Gateshead have looked at entrepreneurial activity, and they've got their own funeral service, I believe. So, are we looking at anything like that?
As I said, we are, there are a number, just examples that we've given you in the appendix to the report, but these are all things that we're interested in. We are engaged with the entrepreneurial work stream as part of Council of the Future initiative, and so we are looking at opportunities to provide better services. We're always looking at improvements to services, but this is an area where we could be perhaps be a bit more entrepreneurial. So certainly the manager, you'll know that Richard Broadley, the manager is very keen on this work, so we'll be reporting back to members on that as soon as that's crystallised a bit more.
I also believe that at some point there may be a request for some investment in the service in order to be able to take forward some of these initiatives. So that will come back to members in due course for decision. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. I had the pleasure of going to an APSI conference where they particularly covered the Gateshead model. It has taken it's quite a significant investment they've got there, and they're expecting quite a long-term return on it, but they are looking to eventually break even and potentially bring profits in at some point, which they can obviously use for other services. I think I've still got some information on it if Councillor Bissett would want that. I'm happy to do that, but they had to do it because they were going to lose it, so they had no choice but to move to that model because of their lack of funding.
I think we must also not forget the focus of keeping the costs of funerals down as low as possible, as it can be a very expensive business, and when some people are on low income, well, there is the support from Social Security Scotland and the support payment, there's still additional costs, and it can be quite a strain on families at that a very difficult time. Councillor Reid?
Yes, it was on that point. I think the cost of the service the council provides is only a fraction of the total cost paid by the bereaved family. I had occasion to assist with a funeral arrangement recently and was quite shocked by the salesmanship employed by the funeral director. You know, you could have had anything over a whole range of things, and the hard sell was on the most expensive. And people understandably want to do the best for their deceased, and they come under a lot of pressure. I think that's an area that needs to be examined by someone somewhere.
Absolutely. I know that there was work done in East Ayrshire, and they worked very closely with one of the funeral directors to look at driving down the costs and being able to offer that low cost. And recommendation 3 is really very much around engaging with the sector to look at where we can get drive down some of those costs wherever possible, and make it as easy as possible for families who are often without any real resources and actually being able to bury or cremate their loved ones. Okay, are we happy to agree with the report? Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Capital Programme, this is a regular update report to the committee on the progress of the capital programme. As always, it's in two parts. The first part is the general services. So if we deal with that initially, the table at the bottom of the first page, page 154, summarises the position, and it will be evident there's been quite significant movement since we last reported, and we'll come on to the reasons for that in a moment. The next section of the report, and the next page, basically takes each of the council's service areas and in the bullet points presented summarises all the main projects that are underway at the moment, which I won't go on. Clearly, if members have any questions, myself or the relevant directors will be able to address them for you. In section 4.2, we pick up on the explanations for the movement in that table on the very first page. And at para 4.2.1, a slightly expanded table gives you the largest elements. And you'll be able to see that these are the early years has been rescheduled basically to align expenditure with grant. Town centres regeneration, which is clearly a live issue for the meeting this morning. And the last element, and the most significant, is slippage, which we'll look at in more depth shortly. And indeed, if you just move forward to the table at para 4.2.6, you can see the reasons for the slippage. And just to draw out from the range of elements in that table, the largest are working top down, Madison Primary School, whereas the comments note there's a linkage with work required, essential work required at Kinnaird. There's Deer, which is the most significant item, and again, an item on this agenda. And the third largest element is the Grangemouth Flood Protection Scheme, which is clearly a very, very large and complex project. As we note in para 4.2.8, as previously agreed by Executive, we've introduced a new monitoring regime, and some of those projects that I've mentioned which breach the trigger thresholds will be considered by CMT in more depth at the next meeting. 4.3 just touches on the resources, and it's a short paragraph, and it just reflects the fact that if expenditure reduces, then the need to borrow reduces, and both are carried forward until such time as we catch up with the... We then turn section 4.5 to the HRA, and as noted in the first paragraph there, 4.5.1, there's a reduction of just over £4.5 million
position reported to October. That primarily relates to the high-rise heating replacement, new build housing and replacement cladding installation. Subsequent paragraphs give a bit more of an explanation on those elements, and also covers other strands in the HRA. In terms of resources for housing, covered that at section 4.6, and the key there are capital finance from current revenue, government grant. There are the production of and their appendix, and section 4.8 just picks up on linkage between the capital programme and the board. Movements in the table 482. The last section of the report, the standard capturing the two reserves, the first one at 495 capital receipts, and the other element is at 490 capital total is the section 75 loans. Coming back to the recommendations, the executive is invited to note, and there are three strands as set out at para 2.1. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mr Schnell. Can I ask just a wee bit about what the intention from SMT would be to following the report? Would they be looking to mitigate or look to accelerate where possible to try and take forward other projects around the slippage? Or
I mean, I think all those strands can be noted. I mean, I think the first thing is to explore in a bit more depth why those situations have happened, and as a subset of that, why do we only know now? Did we or should we have known earlier? So I think it's incumbent upon CMT to, as I say, drill down a bit more to better understand, and from that understanding, hopefully, lessons to be learned that can be applied and we get the benefit in future. And in terms of mitigation, yes, to the extent that projects can be accelerated, we would look to do that, though quite often the scope to be able to do that is somewhat limited, but it is a relevant strand in the mix.
okay, thank you for that. We're coming to our budget time anyway, and obviously, as members have heard at Council, we need to look at the capital programme as a whole and take into account where we are in some of these particular projects, into how we restructure going forward. Therefore, I'm happy to move the report as it is, recognising that there will be further work done in the capital programme going forward into our budget planning process, and indeed a longer term view of capital programming. Councillor Bowes.
Can I formally second, please, and reserve the right?
Thank you. Councillor Munro.
Can I raise a couple of points, please, on the item 419, Community Trust? The largest area of spend is in relation to investment in the Mariner Centre, and I remember at the Trust meeting we agreed 1.1 million for works at the Mariner Centre. But as members will probably know, the Falkirk Herald highlighted last week that much to the amazement of people in Stenhousemuir, Strathcarron shop, people came in to take photographs, and it transpires that there is an intimation that the Trust are about to spend substantial amounts of money, which is noted here, in upgrading the other half of this building. But the volunteers in this place and the Strathcarron Hospice, which is something we're all very keen to support and needs something like 22,000 a day to operate, are saying that they have a lease on this shop till November 2023. There's nothing in their contract would allow it to be terminated before then. And yet, my member on the trust is telling me that this work will start in January and will be completed next year. So there's some kind of contradiction happening here, and I would like some clarity, please.
Okay, I don't know whether we've got MD here today that's going to be able to clarify that for you, because that would be within the trust domain rather than within the council's domain. And that we gave the...
There's a large capital spend here allocated for something
Yep.
which we're being told can't happen.
But the detail that you're looking for would be within the trust domain. We can get a response for you, but we don't have MD here today.
I feel it needed to be highlighted.
Okay. Any other member in relation to capital programme? Happy to accept? Okay, thank you. Treasury Management Interim Review, Brian?
Yes, Convener. This report is produced consistent with the Treasury Management Code, and indeed the code also requires, after consideration by the Executive, for it to be referred on to Council. So basically, there's a strategy produced at the beginning of the year. This is an update on progress, and then final position will be produced for you after the close of the financial year. So, section 4.1 just gives you a bit of backcloth. Probably the main thing to draw of that is the continuing environment of low interest rates, which don't show any sign of changing. 4.2 turns to the borrowing strategy, and that's directly impacted by the report you've just considered in terms of the capital programme. So, as the capital programme spend for this year reduces, the matching borrowing and treasury activity also reduces to be carried forward. So the tables at 4.2.2 and 4.2.3 effectively break that down and match with the pre. At paras 4.2, 7, 8 and 9, we pick up on 3 strands pertinent to the Public Works Loan Board, which is the Council's only source of borrowing. First 2 paragraphs there just deal with the capacity to access slightly cheaper borrowing rates, which are always welcome, and indeed, in some measure, mitigate the comments made at para 429 when the Public Works Loan Board earlier this year arbitrarily announced an increase of 1% in borrowing costs. It's evident that was triggered by moves to curtail the extensive borrowing undertaken in some English councils to invest in commercial property to help defray the particular financial pressures these councils were under. On the other side of the house, we look at the investment strategy at 4.3, and as you'll have heard me say on many occasions when delivering this report, the focus here is on protecting public monies, not on chasing interest rate yield. So we're very clear and very focused on that. You can see the table at the bottom of page 175, paragraph 433. It's just a snapshot in time and shows the range of investments approaching 50 million that was out on that day. That date contains in the table a suite of prudential indicators that we're required to report, and again they're designed to give you comfort that the Treasury operation is within appropriate control parameters. In section 4.6 we touch on member training, and I know in speaking to a few members there's an interest in having another training session, so we'll look to get something in the new calendar year organised. There'll be a lot happening, but we'll see if we can find a slot that's convenient for members and get something organised. Paragraph 4.7 just picks up in benchmarking, and it relates to the investment side and just shows in the appended bar chart the council's level of investment relative to other councils. And you can see that we sit quite comfortably in the middle. So I think some comfort can be drawn from running with the herd, so to speak. So if we just return to the recommendations at the front of the report, and you'll see that includes the reference for the report to be on-forwarded to Council after consideration by the Executive. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Brian. I think our Treasury Management Strategy has served us well in maintaining a prudent view of managing our finances, and I think the interim review demonstrates that quite clearly, and also some of the challenges going forward and the changes around the Public Loan Board, which obviously we have to take into account going forward if we are to look at taking out any additional borrowing and the impacts of that. Saying that, that's been out of our control. That was made by another body with a different focus than Scottish local authorities. So I'm happy to approve the interim review and no doubt as the budget process unfolds, we'll need to refer back to our Treasury Management Strategy and looking at what we can achieve and going forward. But thank you for that. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you, Convener. Sorry. Can I also add my thanks to Mr Smale and his team for both reports? I should have probably done that in the first one. As ever, prudence is your language. On this itself, there obviously was a bit of concern about the Public Works Loan Board going up by 1%. I know you've done some work on it. I think I actually emailed you on the day that happened. And as ever, you've taken the right actions at the right time to secure our position. Do have a little bit of concern over it in a long time, because I think it will end up going to private equity and through bonds rather than staying within the public domain. But it is what it is. As the Leader of the Council says, we don't control that, and we just need to move on with it. Can I also welcome, and I'm sure everybody will, the additional training, and I thoroughly look forward to that, Brian, and I'm happy to second this report.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any members? Councillor Nimmo?
Thanks, Convener. Brian, you mentioned the issue of some English local authorities using the Public Works Board for obtaining funds to invest in property. I think you said, has there been any cases of that in Scotland where local authorities have done the same, that you're aware of?
I think the short answer, Councillor Nimmo, is no. The rules are slightly different up here, and we have less flexibility to pursue such a line. So it's not an issue for Scottish local authorities.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Reid?
When we come to the budget, as we know, we tend to look at reserves and what auditors tell us about the various levels. And I take it the same applies to borrowing. There's a point at which, above which you should not borrow.
Yes. Some members will recall, going back some time now, that the control regime was very different from what it is now, very prescriptive, and basically dictated specific sums that an individual local authority could borrow. Effectively, you were given a ceiling, and indeed that was the reason why, going back some decades now, we were very active in pursuing innovative financing schemes such as the window leasing scheme, the gas central heating leasing schemes for council housing, which otherwise we wouldn't have been able to do under the former control regime. But now, and as has been the case for some time now, a much more flexible approach has been adopted, and we're effectively required to follow the Prudential Code. And that allows you to borrow as long as it's affordable and sustainable. And really, it comes down to your judgment, our judgment as a council, as to what we can afford on a sustainable basis. So that's a very welcome change. But obviously the flip side of that is the onus on us to use that power responsibly, which we have been doing.
I think that will become an area that members will look at maybe more closely, because obviously there's money in the budget for the buildings, 45 million, which will have to be borrowed eventually. There's maybe some other capital spending coming through the eventual trust plan. And of course there's the possibility of adding 1.5% to the council tax, which will make your life somewhat more complicated, I think, next year. I mean, it's just a question of how we feed that into this particular strategy. The strategy may have to change somewhat, will it not? Become rather more daring.
I would be able to use the word daring, innovative perhaps.
Sorry,
and
I forgot you were an accountant.
You should worry if I forget I'm an accountant, perhaps. Maybe the first thing to say is, flowing from the conversations at the 4th of December council meeting, the draft General Services Capital Programme will be coming to the member budget working group on Tuesday, the 17th. So members those attending will see the overall position in terms of the resources we've got available, the projects that are in play, and the gap, and that one gives members the opportunity to say, does that accord with our priorities in terms of matching available resources to the bids that have come in. And also, you'll then have the context of the argument that's made provisionally at the 4th of December Council to potentially harness the uplift in council tax beyond 3%. And you'll be able to see in more practical terms what that circa 20 million would buy you in terms of projects otherwise would not be forward. So I think that would be a significant step forward in members' consideration of this matter.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Convener. I'm sure it was mentioned on a previous report, Brian, or you mentioned at a previous meeting where you were stating that Falkirk Council's borrowing is lower than a lot of other councillors. Is that correct? Can you confirm that?
It's obviously a moving feast. And actually, in some senses, it doesn't really matter. Back to my point, as long as it's affordable. And different councils will have different mixes of how they finance expenditure. So some councils, often it's a case with the cities that have big high-value capital receipts from town centre sites. So they can generate a lot of income from the sale of capital receipts, which isn't open to us. Other councils maybe have more headroom to finance expenditure from current revenue. Some may be more successful in attracting government grant. So there's quite a lot in the mix. So just because one council borrows more than another of itself doesn't really mean that much. And again, you'd have to take on board the relative size of the council. But ultimately, for borrowing, it's about, as long as the council, on a sustainable basis, can afford it, then it's fine.
Councillor Alexander.
Yes, I remember those days of previous levels of austerity in terms of the restrictions we put on us as a local authority. Funnily enough, it was to meet the UK's requirements for the divergence fund to take us into the euro that caused the type of restriction that Brian has outlined this morning. How things have been, but we didn't meet the criteria function then. I don't think we meet it today. But in terms of the report, I think we have to recognise that first of all, if our proposed revenue capital expenditure creating a revenue issue, if that particular criteria had been met, then we would have had some indication from the Scottish Government that our borrowing was too high. We haven't received that. Now, even allowing for the fact that there's less of a will to actually intervene in local government matters in relation to the borrowing levels, we still would have to recognise that if it was crucial, then we wouldn't certainly get the support that we've had from the Scottish Futures Trust, for example. So I'm confident that these agencies, these people, are giving us this quality advice, and the advice that they've given us has been followed to date. So more than happy with that convener.
Thank you. Councillor Munro.
I'd just like to ask how much of our budget is spent on debt repayment as a percentage?
If I just get my budget book, I should be able to give you an answer to that. I'm sure you can. Bear with me for a sec. Roughly about a quarter on debt charges. Bearing in mind that we have two blocks and they're not equal, so a much higher proportion of the housing fund is financed from borrowing. Indeed, housing is a very large capital programme live at the moment, reflecting significant investment into our housing stock. The proportion in the general fund is a bit lower, but it's a significant part of our overall costs, and that's the same for every council. But it's backed by significant assets. If you think in our case, on the one side, on the housing side, we've got what 15,000 houses, but then further investment going into those houses, making sure that we meet the requisite standard housing standards, and then on the general fund side, mainly in education, but also in other roads sector, our infrastructure. So the borrowing, on the one hand, is backed by assets necessary for the delivery of services on the other.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor.
Thanks, Convener. At 4.34, it mentions the loans that are maturing during 2019-20. So when these loans have matured, does that mean we free up funds that can go into the revenue budget, since we've cleared that off?
No, they then need to be refinanced. Sorry. They need to be refinanced. We need to borrow, because that then leaves a gap in our overall funding position. So we need to go and borrow, and then the judgment then is for what period you borrow. And because interest rates for temporary loans or shorter term loans are so low at the moment, the inclination is to go short and therefore incur less interest costs than you would do if you took longer dated loans. So it's constantly churning, but it doesn't free up resources in the way you're suggesting that would help the revenue budget. There's other things we do in the Treasury operation that do, and indeed in next year's provisional budget calculation, there's something like 4 million from Treasury activity that's been used to help balance the budget. So there's a very real example of benefits flowing through from Treasury to help manage the budget gap.
Okay, we're happy to agree the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. The background to this report before you this morning was the motion which came to the council meeting before last, which requested a report be brought back to the executive in relation to staffing matters within the Scottish Welfare Fund team. We start off in the table shown at section 3.2 with a summary of where we are with dealing with community care grants and crisis grants, and the good news is that when we get into September and October, we have no community care grants that are dealt with out the target. We remind members in 3.3 that perfect storm over the course of the summer with a small team which then suffered from a combination of employees on leave and employees who were taken ill. And we tried to cover that time as best possible with a combination of working overtime and displacing staff from other roles with staff who had experience of working in this area. Good news is that the 2 individuals who were suffering from ill health have returned to work. In section 4 of the report, we'll look at how we move forward, having reflected the circumstances of summer, how we dealt with that. What we've decided to do is be proactive, and we're in the process of training a small number of our multi-skilled advisors from our advice and support hubs to be able to undertake a role within the Scottish Welfare Fund team as and when required. We currently have 4 permanent employees within the team, and they're supplemented by 2 temporary staff. We give details of what's happening at the moment in terms of the trend of grant applications, and also note that the advice is that we'd expect to see an increase in grants as a result of Brexit. Moving forward, we have recently taken part in a survey of all local authorities who are looking at the issue of the size of Scottish Welfare Fund teams, and the outcome of that survey is that a council of our size should have a minimum of 6 officers within the team. So accordingly, we are looking to extend the contracts of the temporary officers with a view to making one or both of these posts permanent, and we'll do that by utilising savings elsewhere within the service. So by bringing the team up to 6 and using the resources that we have from training the multi-skilled advisors elsewhere, we hope will be well placed to deal with the demands that come our way. So the recommendation, convener, is set out in section 2 of the report.
Thank you, Mr Ritchie. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you, convener. Obviously, the situation occurred in July and August, and I can only welcome the data in the graph at 3.2, which shows September and October where the zero figure. It's obviously showing it being under control. The way the management have actually looked at the staff with the thoughts of bringing the 2 temporary to extend them, and we're looking at potentially bringing them in as full-time permanent, as permanent staff. I think it's a good move. Most importantly, I think, is the multi-skilling of other staff. So should there be additional resource required in that area, that it will have to be done. The report itself says it, and depends what happens this week. You could be needing it in February if we end up leaving, or if Brexit goes through at the end of January. As the report has already said. I'm pleased that the way management have looked at this. I think they're taking some positive actions. I think the horizon scanning, looking at where it's going in the future, and I just have to support the recommendations in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Bowes. I'm happy to second the report. I think it's a pragmatic way forward, utilising the staff that we have and opening up opportunities for our multi-skilled advisors to be able to enhance the team and indeed enhance their own knowledge and skills within their particular role. And as we don't really know where the next year, 2 years is likely to take us, it gives us an opportunity to reflect and rebalance staff resources should they be required to do so. Councillor Bissett.
Thank you, Convener. I'm glad to see that Councillor Black's motion to Council was vindicated, and we will now have another 2 full-time employees in the welfare team to carry out this very important role. So in the spirit of the policies of Agenda Item 5 and in the spirit of Christmas, I would like to ask Councillor Hughes to publicly apologise for comparing the Labour group to Boris Johnson proroguing Parliament. And will he apologise to the 167 people who never received their community care grant in time and subsequently had to go for a longer period of time without white goods or carpets? Thank you.
Councillor Bissett, the staff resource is the same staff resource, and all we've done is taken the temporary staff and made them permanent. Therefore, I don't believe that Councillor Hughes has anything to apologise for. As was explained to you, there were mitigating circumstances around the delivery of the service at that time, and one that could not be predicted or indeed immediately mitigated. It was very unfortunate, and the staff had worked very hard to do the very best to ensure that those that were in greatest need got what they required. Therefore, I feel your comments against Councillor Hughes are totally inappropriate. Councillor Alexander.
Not only are they inappropriate, Convener, I think Councillor Bowes should, Councillor Bissett should apologise to the Council, because it should be remembered this is a motion, this is a benefit that was put forward by the Scottish Government. This was a benefit that has been opposed by every year since by the Labour Party in Scotland, because they have opposed the budget every year for the last Humpty years. So I think that if Mr Bissett wishes to apologise, then I think we would accept that apology given the actions of his party. I think that's probably where the connection between Boris Johnson and the Parliamentary Labour Party in Holyrood came into being. The fact that the issue before us has been so much dealt with in relation to what can only be described as absolute nonsense. So the facts are that Labour have opposed this benefit. This benefit has gone to benefit the majority of those who have applied within the timescale that was outlined. The benefit itself has gone to the most needy within our community, and that should be recognised. It should also be recognised that had Labour been in power, the chances are that the benefit wouldn't exist.
Thank you. Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. Still no apology from the SNP administration. 167 families left suffering because they've not had any money on time. It's just not acceptable. Sorry.
Can I just remind that your party, you didn't bring forward any additional resources for this service as part of your budget? Okay, in which case we're happy to accept the report and move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, this is the latest of our regular reports that we bring to members in respect of the TIF initiative, its progress and the programme moving forward. Also, we wish to advise members of progress in respect of the Falkirk Gateway project as well. So turning to the TIF itself, obviously members will be familiar with the background to this and the purpose of it. But as we say at paragraph 4.1, this has been ongoing, project's been ongoing for 6 years. The council's already delivered £6 million of infrastructure, and the consequent creation of, by the private sector, of significant spaces, workspaces and significant numbers of jobs. This is a very complex project and a long-term project, and as a consequence of that, the programme requires to be adjusted from time to time to take cognizance of changes in circumstances. So the updated proposed programme is attached as Appendix 1, and the summary of the changes are included in paragraph 4.2 in the report. There's also been a review undertaken of the business case, the programme and financial model. We have a steering group for this project comprising ourselves, Scottish Enterprise, Scottish Futures Trust and Scottish Government. And that review has undertaken has concluded that the £67 million of the TIF funding can be funded within the 25-year period. There is a need to address a slight change in arrangements that's been precipitated by the government adopting certain elements of the Barclay Review, and as a consequence of that, the NDR for new properties will be delayed by 1 year, and so we're asking for an additional year's extension to the TIF to mitigate the risk associated with those works. So turning to the Gateway development proposals, again, members are aware of the proposals that have previously been reported to them. You're aware that Fintry Estates and Limited and Hargreaves are the preferred developer for this project. But since we've last spoken to members, some work has been commissioned by the consortium to take the project forward, and that work is described in paragraph 5.3 of the report. Key elements of that are the retail impact assessment. Now, this would have been required in any event associated with a planning application coming forward for this project, but it was decided that this work would be jointly commissioned between the council and the developer at this stage of the process to give surety that this proposed development would not have an unacceptably adverse impact on town centres in the area. And you can see from the appendix that that is indeed proved to be the case. And the impact will be most felt by a central retail park rather than either Grangemouth or Falkirk town centres. But as the retail park is trading well, that impact can be readily absorbed. As I say, this would normally have been commissioned as part of the planning process, so this will come back to members and, as part of that process at a later stage. The other piece of significant work that's been undertaken is around the hotel capacity study. As you know, there's a provision in the project for a hotel, and that work has been done. There's been a significant interest in that proposal, and we'll be taking that forward, a development taking that forward once we can get a preferred operator or management company identified. Site investigation works have also been undertaken. Members will know that there is a receipt being identified in the earlier report, but this is obviously subject to issues around ground investigation. So these specific works have been undertaken that will allow us to crystallise on the sum that will be due to the council at the end of the day. Once all this work is done, there will be a development agreement that will be finalised, and we'll be bringing that back to members for your consideration next year. There's been consultation undertaken in respect of this project, and this was well attended, and particularly associated with that was obviously the consultation in respect of the new crossing that's proposed. Accordingly, convener, the recommendations reflect what I've said. They're contained in paragraph 2, and it's to agree the revised schedule, implementation schedule as I've referred to, request Scottish Government to make the adjustments to the programme from 25 to 26 years to take account of the changes to the non-domestic rates arrangements, and to note the progress of the Gateway development, and that further reports will be brought back to members next year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Geisler. Councillor Alexander, the Gateway TIF.
Yes, I'm happy to propose the recommendations contained in the report, paragraph 2. There's a strong sense of déjà vu with this particular report in regards to the Gateway development anyway. This is a stage we were approaching in 2006-07 when the elections intervened, and we all know what happened after that in relation to the moratorium that was put on all capital investment by the administration for a year. We then had the crash of the banks, which unfortunately left us without a programme. Also left us without a major partner in that particular programme, given that the Royal Bank of Scotland was our preferred partner. The TIF has been generally a good thing for the district, and we certainly welcome the report. Welcome also the flexibility that's been given by the extra year, and recognise the reason for this. The gateway development itself in relation to particularly the impact this is going to have on the town centre. I'm pleased and not surprised, but pleased that the survey that's been undertaken, the work that's undertaken, has demonstrated that this has no impact on the town centre, given the type of business that it's going to be contained. And in actual fact is smaller in terms of the retail element than the programme that I've already made reference to this morning, prior to 2007. So with that, Convener, I'm happy to move the recommendations, happy to take any questions that may come, and thank the officers in particular for the hard work they've undertaken to resolve our economic problems, kickstart our economic fight back from the current position that we're in to a stronger position with the development of the gateway site in particular. So with that, Convener, formally move the recommendations contained therein at paragraphs 2.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. I'm happy to second. I think that this allows the Gateway project to move to the next stage. I think the concerns that had been raised with regard to impact in the town centre the consultation's been very helpful in detailing where there's likely to be any impact, and that there's little impact on Grangemouth or Falkirk as a result of this, but the retail part may well see a slight impact, but one that could be easily absorbed. I think it's been a long time coming, this project, but obviously we understand the reasons why, which I've quite clearly detailed. This is a long-term project. There is various pieces of work that will have to be done before things can go on the ground there, but that gives the opportunity for the developers to go do the work that they have to do in identifying those that will populate the site and going forward, and the sooner we can allow them to go on with that process, the better. So I'm happy to second. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Convener. I wasn't a member of the council when this project was first started, and I realised that there are a lot of work has gone into it, and it's a very complex project. However, I think it is important that some of the issues that are mentioned in this report are raised. The fact that the payback period is extending from 25 to 26 years, and that within 4.2 changes to delivery timescale in relation to M9 Junction 5, the Westfield infrastructure, the vehicle hub, and also the changes to design and delivery of the Grangemouth flood alleviation scheme, all of which are very expensive projects, and if these are delayed, this may incur additional costs. And as this is a TIF and is expected to generate additional income for the council over time, it's very important that as a council we look at it and the case put forward. And there are issues that there is a risk that creating a further retail outlet here will damage the town centre. And I have to mention the donut, the bridge structure, which I'm told is the only solution to crossing the road. last week there were roadworks at this point, and we had gridlock with the new college about to open, the Helix, and the stadium all in close proximity. Are we not going to just creating a huge bottleneck? Do we have a traffic survey to determine what the issues are around this if all of these facilities are busy and at peak times? On the issue of hotel capacity, the study says, and I had to read this a few times, that an expression of interest had been made by 9 organisations, but not one of them want to build a hotel. They want to manage or run it. And it says very clearly here, this will require the developer to retain the completed hotel. Does not raise a question mark over whether or not it will be built. So I think there are questions here over traffic management around. I mean, the roundabout that is proposed is a very expensive structure, and I think there are issues also around the question of a hotel, and I think we need to look into.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Munro. Can I just say that we have a very experienced team within Development Service that have managed projects of this kind of magnitude in the past very successfully. And one of the reasons that this paper is on the report today is all of this will have to be phased and in order to be able to actually manage some of the issues you've just raised. So they all are well known within the service, and they are very good at managing that. But at the end of the day, there is a tremendous opportunity for investment. And can I just say, in relation to the hotel, if you actually look at what else is happening around Scotland and the rest of UK, the model that's been brought forward isn't that different from anywhere else, and they've successfully managed to do that and attract the investment and indeed the economic impacts positively on the area as a result of that. Mrs Geisler, do you want to maybe just go through some of the points there?
Yes, just to echo what you're saying, obviously there will be, with the extent of works associated with the gateway and the crossing, there will be traffic disruption. There's no way to alter that. But as the leader says, this work will be phased to minimise the disruption. And I think that there is a significant prize here for the council. And that prize, there's some downsides to gaining that prize, but that will be managed as carefully as possible in terms of traffic management issues. Part of the project is to improve the Westfield Junction to allow the traffic to flow more readily. So at the end of the process, the traffic will move more freely than before. In respect of the hotel aspect to this, the arrangements that are being suggested for the gateway are no different really from any other new build hotel arrangements. We will have to develop heads of terms with the developer. We will have to develop a development agreement, and these will come back to the members at some point in the future. And as part of that, we will be ensuring that the arrangements for delivery of all aspects of the gateway are as robust as they possibly can be. So we're not asking members to make decisions on this today. This is merely an update, and we will bring back reports for you to consider in the future. In the meantime, my colleagues in Development Services speaks here today. Colin Frame's very familiar. Obviously, he's the lead officer for this project. We're more than happy to sit down with you and take you through some of the detail anytime you want to do that with us.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Convener. Just a quick one. I think Councillor Munro actually answered her own question there, highlighting the current bottleneck down at that area and the need for her, as I'll quote her, the donut going in place. So I think she's actually just highlighted the case that we need to progress with this as much as we can. You're shaking your head, but if there's a bottleneck then out, it means we need to address it. Thanks, Convener.
The recent works, I understand, were part of the site investigations that were taking place, and as with any project of that magnitude, there will be some disruption for these pieces of work. And it's about being able to inform people. But we do have a bottleneck at the Westfield roundabout as it is. Councillor Bissett.
Thank you, Convener. Of course, all this, the gateway still has to come forward to planning, doesn't it? We're kind of getting a bit ahead of ourselves anyway. I noticed there was under the retail impact assessment, there was 150 on-street surveys carried out. Was there any consultation carried out with the town centre and Falkirk Town Centre and Grangebury Town Centre retailers, did we ask their opinion whether they felt development down there would detract from the town centre?
Mrs Geisler?
I'm one of the directors on Falkirk Delivers, which is the town centre management company, the bid company, as you know, and this was discussed extensively over a number of meetings, and the bid company understand the process. Once I explained to them of how the retail impact assessment is compiled, they had some anxieties. Obviously, they had some anxieties, but I think these are now being these fears are being allayed by this independent study that's been undertaken. I think it's important to note that these retail impact assessments follow a standard format, and for them to be robust, they must follow that standard format. So hopefully that gives you some information about that.
Councillor Bowes?
I think it's been quite clear, because this has gone on through a number of reports over quite a while now, that there has always been quite a large infrastructure, i.e. the roadside, was going to be done on the Westfields site, because obviously if you're putting in additional resource with the gateway, what's happening with the college, it was always required. So I'm quite surprised that even a question was asked about that today, because it has been in a number of reports. And can I just add because all the way through it, can I just add my thanks and my appreciation of the professionalism of Mrs Geisler and her team in doing this. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Nicholl?
I'm in no way doubting the professionalism of Mrs Geisler, but I do have in my own head now a bit of difficulty squaring what she's just said with all the letters that myself and no doubt colleagues received recently from town centre retailers, mostly independent retailers, saying that the town centre was hanging by a thread and such comments, and squaring that with any further retail development, which of course takes away business from the existing town centre. Now, my colleague Councillor Munro at the full council said that, and it was a statement of fact, that when the retail park was built, that was certainly a nail in the coffin of the town centre. And I can't help thinking that, whilst accepting, of course, this is nothing like on the scale of the retail park, anything that takes shoppers away from Falkirk town centre, which, by the admission of shopkeepers, trade there is not very good, is not a thing that I would imagine that they're very supportive of. So I'm just not sure how many people are realising that this is an additional threat that's on the tracks heading in the direction of Falkirk town centre. So hopefully the Falkirk Herald will give this more publicity, just to alert people that, you know, in addition to all the other challenges that town centres face, and Falkirk amongst them, we seem hell-bent on setting yet another difficulty for our traders, in that we're setting up another alternative shopping venue. And there's no getting away from that. And, you know, there was only so much money in people's pockets. And every time we set up an alternative to the town centre, that is another blow to the town centre. So however it's dressed up, I've got to say that I can see this coming back to bite.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholl. Can I just make it absolutely clear that the type of retail that is designed for this is out of town retail that is not likely to be attracted to come into Falkirk town centre or indeed any town centre. You can disagree with me, Councillor Nicholl, but that is within the specification. And I do believe that your party in particular are creating anxiety, unnecessary anxiety within Falkirk town centre, and the comments and the direction of travel that you're going in relation to our council headquarters and arts centre. So I think that we need to be very careful about how we approach things. But I can assure you that I have spoken to many of the town centre retailers, and they are less anxious about what's happening at the Gateway and more anxious about what's happening in Falkirk town centre.
Well, we'll just need to disagree, convener, because that's not the influence that I'm getting from many Falkirk town centre retailers who do not understand the attraction of building a headquarters on this site, nor do they understand the need to have yet another venue for people to go and spend barely half a mile from the existing town centre.
Councillor Nicholl, the town centre retailers are very supportive of the building of a new HQ and Arts Centre within Falkirk Town Centre, and that has been expressed on a number of occasions. And if you weren't at full council, I'm not going to continue this argument, but I'm just making that statement because I do believe you're doing Falkirk Town Centre an injustice.
I think you know my view on the Arts and Centre.
Councillor Reid.
Yes, going back to the TIF, which seems to have been ignored to some extent. This was a project that was a daring project. It originated in the previous administration, but nonetheless had the unanimous support of the council.
No, it wasn't entirely unanimous to begin with, Councillor Reid.
Well, I think the TIF was, because I can remember Councillor MacDonald, who's now Mr MacDonald MSP, supporting it and suggesting it was his idea, which it may well have been. But nonetheless, all of the votes on the TIF, to my recollection, were unanimous. And that's when the council's at its best, when it thinks big and when it thinks together. What we're seeing here today is not representative of that. No. The TIF is a huge project, and it's the envy of probably every local authority in Scotland, to be honest. Okay. And the fact that our officers hardly use any outside help in this particular project is a commendation to all of them. And it also attracts the best staff as well. If you have good projects, you will get good staff. So the TIF, I think, still continues to enjoy unanimous support. Moving to the Gateway, I recall quite clearly when the retail park was proposed, there was to be no food there, absolutely no food. But unfortunately for years, the developer, I think it was Ladbrokes at the time, stymied and refused to continue building until we granted them planning permission for food. And that was what led to the decline in the town centre. What I'm trying to say I'm not a member of the planning committee, so I can maybe speak more freely, but we want to be careful that the same thing does not happen with this, and that the good intentions regarding convenience goods not being there is kept. So I would ask my planning committee colleagues to be alert to the actual conditions imposed down there. But an effect of 2% on the town centre, yes, it could affect some businesses. However, on last Friday we had a meeting with the town centre, the larger town centre group, and they didn't express any concern about that particular figure.
No, indeed. Indeed. And you're absolutely right, Councillor MacDonald at the time, now MSP, was very much an advocate for the TIF, and particularly for investment for Falkirk. It did take a bit of time to get that unanimous agreement going forward, but we got that, absolutely, and Falkirk is the most successful TIF in Scotland, and you're absolutely right that others are envious of what we are actually delivering from this, and we have to make sure we get the maximum benefit from it going forward. Similarly, you're absolutely right, and I'm not a member of the Planning Committee either, but that's all of the Gateway will be subject to coming forward to planning, and it will be for members to decide, and it's been for members to look at protecting Falkirk Town Centre. In doing that, we can't change the decisions of the past. We have that legacy, and we have to live with that and mitigate it, but it will be up to members to make sure that they make the right decisions going forward. But I think this is a good step forward for Falkirk. It demonstrates investment, also demonstrates ambition, and it chimes well with maximising our natural assets that we have, particularly around tourism going forward. Any other member? We're happy to agree the report. Thank you. Item 14 is Bonnybridge Transport Issues, Scottish Transport Appraisal, Guidance, Stag and Pre-Appraisal. Mrs Geisler, yourself again.
Yes, that's me again. Thank you for that, Convener. Yes, members will recall that this issue was discussed some time ago as to whether or not move forward with this.
Excuse me, Mrs Geisler, could you move a bit closer to the microphone? I can't hear you for the conversations going on.
My apologies, I'll start again. This issue was considered by members some time ago when they previously agreed to undertake what's called a stag pre-appraisal to investigate transport issues in Bonnybridge and report back as to whether or not a stag 1 and stag 2 appraisal work should be undertaken. So there's been a lot of work undertaken by my colleagues in Development Services, and Kevin Collins is here with us this morning. He's been leading on that work. And the report describes the consultation work that's been undertaken to gather information to allow us to complete the stag pre-appraisal work. And this has been delayed somewhat because of timetable changes, both in relation to rail and bus transport. Helpfully, members have previously agreed in relation to this work moving forward that money should be set aside to assist speeding this on. So I'm pleased to be able to say that the initial work that has been undertaken so far has concluded that it would be appropriate to move on to pursue a stag stage 1 and stage 2, and the recommendations reflect that, Convener. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner, could I, before I bring you in, could I just ask Councillor Coleman as one of the local members to speak? He did formally write to me and request the opportunity, and as it is very much a localised issue in relation to Bonnybridge, on this occasion I'm happy to do that, and it's not been something that's been utilised in the past, but because it is very much a local issue, I'm happy to allow the local member to speak.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the Executive, as you said, when I'm not a member of the committee. I understand that this is the first time a councillor has invoked their right to request to speak, so I'm very grateful that you've granted that. I'd also like to express my gratitude to the Reinstate Bonnybridge Railway Group. I have no doubt in my mind that their efforts have really helped to motivate the political will and support for a railway station. I recall under the previous administration that it was only the SNP that supported a new railway station as part of their manifesto commitments. So I'm very pleased that the stag process now has support from all ward members and cross-party support. And I hope that Councillor Reid's comments on the previous item about the council being at its best when it is unanimous will be a prediction for the future for this process. So turning to the report in front of the committee, while I understand that the stag process is not for appraising a predetermined solution, I think it would be fair to say that the views of the residents of Bonnybridge are that a train station is required for the village. So I'm grateful that one of the options being considered is a new railway station. Now, I know that members are fully aware of the economic benefits that this would bring, not only to Bonnybridge, but also to the district as a whole. So I do trust that all members of the council will do what they can to encourage Transport Scotland to come to a timely and accurate conclusion as it reviews the pre-appraisal prepared by Falkirk Council. I'd also like to encourage members of the Executive to agree the recommendations in the report, and in particular to agree for a further and more detailed appraisal as part of Stag 1 and Stag 2, subject to the agreement of Transport Scotland, of course. And lastly, I'd like to thank the portfolio holder for his efforts in supporting the Stag process and ask him to continue to champion the process. Thank you. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman. I'll bring in Councillor Gardner as the portfolio holder.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you to Mrs Geisler. Thank you to Councillor Coleman for his input there. And I'd also like to thank Councillor Reid for his sensible adult contribution in the last agenda item. It's most welcome. This SNP administration recognised that transport links are crucial for the economic well-being of the district. We committed in our manifesto that we would accelerate infrastructure projects, and one of those was moving forward with a stag report in relation to Bonnybridge Railway Station, something the previous Labour Conservative Billy Buchanan-led administration failed to do. I have a quote from the convener of the group Reinstate Bonnybridge Railway Station. It's just a small quote. "We are happy that the officers have completed the pre-appraisal and has a potentially positive outcome, showing what we have been saying since our group was founded and what the residents have been saying for decades. We anxiously await Transport Scotland and getting back to the council officers so we can move forward without a doubt to the next steps of gaining a station in Bonnybridge." And on that note, we have news in relation to the report from Transport Scotland. This was due to come back to Falkirk Council sometime in the new year, but following contact from the council leader and myself, This has now been brought forward, and we should be in receipt of this before we break for the Christmas holidays, which I'm sure the Reinstate group will be happy with. Hopefully we can then move forward with our manifesto commitment. Thank you, and happy to move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Garner.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Okay, any other member? Councillor Nimmo.
Convener, this may well be a local issue as far as Bonnybridge is concerned, but I can remember quite some time back where Bonnybridge and Grangemouth were talked about at the same time. What's happening with the stag report for Grangemouth?
I will bring Mrs Geisler in because that is not being forgotten. In fact, it's an integral part of our investment zone and part of the bid to both UK and Scottish governments with regard to the growth deal. Mrs Geisler, Grangemouth and Railway Station.
I don't really have anything to add to that. That's absolutely correct. It is part of one of the themes within the investment zone proposition that we will be reactivating with the UK government after the election.
Okay.
Could I also remind members that at one time a Lurison station was suggested for the child support agency?
You put Denon in that as well, Councillor.
Okay, if there is no other member, we're happy to accept that, and as I say, we'll get the consultation circulated, the feedback from Transport Scotland circulated in due course.
Good morning, I'm Madeleine Hunt from Bowness and Community Council in Bowness. I met with Pete Reid yesterday and Jackie MacArthur, so I'll not keep you too long. I was quite concerned when the minutes of the agenda of this meeting came out last week, because originally when we met we had asked for 500,000, which is what we've been allocating now. We had asked originally for that, and then we got told that it was only going to be divided between three centres, 3 town centres, and so we thought the best way for this was to split it 3 ways. So we asked for 660,000, and then of course we were informed. Well, we were led to believe that we were getting $1 million, shall I put it that way? And then, of course, when this came out, it was a great disappointment. So I just asked the question, how was the money allocated, and why, once again, does Falkirk get the bulk of the money and the little towns are just given a wee sweetener to keep them quiet? I mean, there's people say, how would you spend $1 million in Bowness? Quite easily, actually. To be honest with you, I could spend 10, but there we go. And I just wondered how you arrived at the split in the money. Why did Falkirk get so much and we get so little, or can you not answer that question? Can you? Thank you.
To answer your question, my understanding, Madeleine, is that projects were discussed with the individual communities, and as a result of the discussions around the projects of what they would like to see done, and recognising that the fund is time limited, that was how the process had gone. And following identification of the projects, they were brought forward in June to the executive, and they were then asked to be progressed to a more robust cost, and that's how the funding was split. These were based on the projects. I don't believe that there was any indication of the split of the projects being equally. It was about what could actually make a fairly immediate impact within each of the town centres, recognising where they were. My understanding from speaking to people in Bowness, that one thing that they wanted was about the retention of the library and making the community rooms more accessible to the community. And that was one of the focuses of the projects, and it is one of the focuses of the projects. I don't know whether Mrs Geisler, we've got Pete here as well. I don't know whether either of you wish to make any comment about how the projects were split, or how the funding was split.
Just to really agree with you, I mean, obviously the project lists were provided and agreed by members in June, and following from that further work was done. There is an issue, as you say, about deliverability. We're required to commit this funding by the end of the financial year, and obviously communities are, town centres are expecting us to deliver in the project shortly thereafter. So it was a combination of the priorities previously identified, as you have mentioned, in Grangemouth and Falkirk. These were enshrined in the two reports that are mentioned in my report today. And the Bowness one is really a reflection of the priorities identified by the communities themselves. I think we did identify in the previous report that there were 3 areas that were for priority, and Bowness was included in that. And as far as Falkirk is concerned, Falkirk is obviously the largest of our town centres. It has the longest list of projects. If you look at the list of projects that are included in revitalising Falkirk, we haven't gone anywhere near all those projects. So I think it's really a proportion is around existing expectations of and aspirations of communities. It's around deliverability within the timetable and the proportions that each of the centres bear to each other.
Okay, thank you, Mrs Geisler. I'll open it up for members to ask any questions in relation to the comments made by Madeleine. Councillor Alexander.
Can I ask Madeleine if she would accept that she wasn't actually promised a figure of the overall budget? She was offered a programme from the overall budget, in particular the library, the infrastructure works in terms of Wi-Fi, etc., and the empty promotions of the empty shops.
Okay.
Can you confirm that all of these are going ahead?
Yes, they are moving forward. As far as I know, there's been very little consultation since the original meeting. Yesterday was the first time I'd met up again with Pete. Although I did contact that we kept in touch by telephone, mainly me ringing him.
You all accept that you were offered a programme, and the programme's going ahead?
Some of it's going ahead, yes.
Which part
We
is
had asked for premises in the town, and that's not going ahead.
Premises?
Yeah, we had asked for an office premises. Even in the business park, there's empty council offices there.
Right. What organisation is this for?
We wanted it for hot desking with our networking group. So as people that work from home can meet up and discuss things during office hours.
This would be a community council run?
Community council
service.
and Bonet.
Right. I don't think there's any precedent for that, but I think happy it's been confirmed that the programme by and large is going ahead.
Okay, is it Councillor Nicholl or is it yourself, Councillor Munro?
Thank you, Convener. Madeleine, it's the case, isn't it, that your anxieties over this are principally around the lack of communication that you've received from the council on what was actually happening vis-à-vis the list and things. But I noticed that at the meeting yesterday, the issue of the hub for people coming in since the one-stop shop moved to Grangemouth, upgrades weren't actually mentioned in here, but there was some clarity given over that at the meeting.
No, there was no clarity given, to my knowledge, about a hub. I just thought Pete said that he'd forgot about the hub, or he hadn't written it down, but we never discussed if we would get one, to my knowledge.
Convener, I'm happy to clarify there.
What
we talked about, I think we're talking about 2 hubs here. Madeleine had mentioned to me that they were looking for office space for the community groups to meet in and to network, and for there to be a benefit of a sort of a hub type space for the community groups to share ideas. And what I confessed to yesterday was from our initial meeting in, I think it was April or May, that that I would go away and speak to my colleagues in the Estates Department to see if there was anything could be done to look to see if there was opportunity there. I think what the councillor is referring to is, Councillor Munro is referring to, is the hub facility that was created within Bowness Library for members of the public to come and speak to the council about day-to-day council matters. So that's two separate issues. That's not forgotten, and that is something I've been having discussions with the architects with a view to looking, and with the library staff with a view to looking to create a more private space within the library that improves the facility there than what's there at the moment.
Okay.
Thank you, but it isn't actually mentioned in the document here, so that would
I think
need
it's mentioned within the library access improvements in general. I think it's probably a catch-all. I do appreciate that perhaps it's maybe ambiguous, but
the circumstances in which people come with challenges now are very challenging.
I think this is for questions, and perhaps you want to
Yes.
hold that for the debate, Councillor Munro. Is there any other questions? Okay, thank you, Madeline.
Thank
Okay,
you, Councillor. Thank you, Convener.
Mrs. Geisler, do you want to present the report?
Let's get myself organised. Yes. Members will recall the previous meeting that's been referred to already in relation to the proposals to bring forward the Town Centre Capital Fund, our share of the Town Centre Capital Fund, which is almost £2 million. As I've mentioned already, there is a programme, quite a detailed programme that has been developed in relation to Falkirk and Grangemouth through Revitalising Falkirk and Making Places document respectively. And the Bowness element has been taken forward through consultation with the Community Council and with Bowness. The purpose of the funding is, as we say at paragraph 3.4, to stimulate and support the place-based investment. And it's about town centres. We've mentioned already today about how town centres up and down the land are struggling. And this is the funding that's been identified, provided by government to take some immediate actions to try and alleviate some of the difficulties. Just to reflect on the previous report, we did select, and members agreed to select the areas of Falkirk, Grangemouth and Bowness because the impacts are proportionally being felt more significantly in those areas. The funding, suggested funding is contained in the table within the report, and as we've touched on this morning, these projects were approved by members and the funding attached to them has been developed as a consequence of that. But these programmes have been identified as those which the consultees have suggested are important to them. They've been reflected in these plans I've mentioned. And also these are projects that can be delivered, can be committed within the timescales and can be delivered relatively quickly, and that the proportions of the expenditure is relatively fairly distributed as well. There will obviously be further consultation with the various groups following the decision today to develop the projects in more detail, but an approval today would allow us to finalise the programme and to move forward with committing the expenditure in the timescales that that applies. So the recommendations, Convener, are contained in section 2, and that is to approve the terms of the report and note that there will be further discussions with relevant parties, and there will be further reports coming forward to members. But also there's an important element of this, is that particularly in Grangemouth there may be some consultation where properties are included in the HRA, and there's a separate process for consultation associated with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Geisler. Councillor Alexander.
Yes, Convener. Thanks very much. I think this is a good report. The issues that people have asked for have been addressed, and they accept that. Why Falkirk's getting the greatest share, you'll have to walk along the Market Street to see the reason for that, and perhaps if the first bus hadn't abandoned the town centre location that they held, then perhaps we were in a better position. Simply wouldn't have needed to introduce some of the draconian safety works that have been proposed as part of this report. As far as the other areas are concerned, then you already heard that it's programmes, not pound notes, if you like, that are committed to an area. And the programmes, in this case, if coming in below budget, then you know, that's to be welcome. But the bottom line is that the programme that was agreed with the community has been adhered to and delivered accordingly. So with that, Convener, the 2.1 recommendations, I'd ask the committee to support the 3 recommendations therein.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. This was a fund that was very much time limited, and £2 million isn't nearly enough to do what we need to do in any of our town centres. However, it was recognised that Bowness, Grangemouth and Falkirk have been significantly impacted with previous investments fairly fresh within Stennismuir and Denny. Also took cognizance that some of our smaller centres of population haven't had much by way of investment in the past either. However, from experience of previous town centre funds, spreading the funding too thin means you achieve very little. Therefore, by focusing on these 3 particular areas, we have the potential to make some meaningful investment, and it was very much, I guess, it's be targeted by the communities. We're never going to be able to fill with under £2 million the community's expectations. However, we are able to deliver something that is significant in doing that, and it is a first stage in a programme. We need to continue to recognise that our town centres do need to have further investment and continual investment, and use what funding we have wisely to lever in external support by way of other monies that can assist us. And I know that Pete's team in particular are working very hard about getting additional heritage lottery funding, etc., for the historic areas, and indeed Grangemouth will be the largest beneficiary of the investment zone funding and going forward. But this is a good start. It's a good start to demonstrate our commitment to town centres and going forward. I'm very happy to second the recommendations. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Convener. You're right that this is a windfall from Westminster, the High Street Fund. It's not alone, and we need, as councillors, to spend it wisely. In Falkirk, as you said, traders are desperate for practical measures to improve footfall, and better signage for people to find car parks, especially the tourists from the Wheel and the Kelpies, better accessibility, especially at the eastern end of the town around Calendar Square up to Cownwine, are some of the things that are being asked for. But people like Pete, who carried out the last THI, is the person that put in the pavement round the Cownwine. So it may well be that it's a hard thing for them to look at, but it's something that should be considered. And we need to ask the traders and the wider public whether what we have here it is actually doing enough for the town, because we're talking about car park and signage audit, a CARS scheme, which is grants for refurbishment of properties, which happened under the last THI. Again, fees for this. There is some public realm works, but apart from that, I can't see a huge amount specifically for Falkirk in what is written here. And I would be very keen to know whether Falkirk traders feel that this is the definitive, or whether it's going to be looked at again. The definitive plan, I mean, if we're going to knock down buildings or audit in terms of conservation, that's not going to really help traders. Are these the key things they want? And I think we need to actually ensure that we're asking them these questions. And in terms of the Bowness contribution, I think that sticks very specifically to what it was that was asked for originally in terms of the library, although, as was mentioned earlier, it didn't mention the hub facility, but the meeting with, if you read it yesterday, made it very clear that it actually encompasses the things we asked for and will be of great benefit to the town. But I do feel that the bits above are in the main not specific enough in terms of what it is the traders want, and I think that maybe requires some further discussion with traders as to whether it encompasses the things that they really need.
I'm happy to answer that question, and I had hoped that you would be able to have looked at the Town Centre Action Plan following the partnership meeting last week, because these particular items exactly mirror what is in the action plan for the town centre. That was driven by the various workshops that were facilitated by the Scottish Futures Trust and Architecture and Design Scotland with the town centre retailers and the town centre communities. So that's what they've asked for, and this is what we are delivering. And that's directly correlates to that. So that's where this has come from. The biggest aspect is around the public realm improvements and some of the works that have to that we're looking to take place at Newmarket Street, and that's as a consequence of the bus station. And there's some safety aspects that we need to do in order to improve things within that area. But that is, again, it's directed by those that are working, using and have businesses within the town centre. That's not something that officers have just dreamed up to spend the money.
I think, Convener, that having sat at that meeting for 3 hours, very little of what was in that action plan was discussed. It only appeared around 4 o'clock. And what I did hear from the only 2 traders that were there was that they were very keen to have parking on a level playing field. They wanted something free, similar to that which is provided within the retail park and a disc scheme or something of that nature. And the issues around the needle exchange and the drugs within the town centre, which was causing concerns and antisocial behaviour to be addressed as a priority, as you know. So I don't feel that there was adequate time at that meeting for us to hear the views of what the traders felt about this.
I appreciate, again, that was your first meeting, but there has been other meetings previously where that has been developed, that there has been greater engagement within that, and a lot of the issues are in process of being addressed, and perhaps a meeting with the officers could maybe give a wee bit more detail to you individually on that and bring you up to speed exactly where things are. Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Convener. You'd actually think Councillor Munro was currently running an election campaign with one of the statements she came out with during her words there, mentioning that it was Westminster money. This is not Westminster money, and if she cares to read the papers in 3.3, it explains that it's Scottish Government money. The Government launched a £50 million fund earlier this year to improve amenity and help regenerate town centres. Of that, we've got £1.976 million.
Okay, thank you. Any other members? Councillor Nicholl.
Convener, I've known you many years, and I'm sure it's not your intention to come across as patronising and operating on such a short fuse, but that's how you're coming across, Convener, and I'm afraid whether you like it or not, you have to listen to all members in this chamber. Whatever your private thoughts are, every member should be listened with respect and certainly not patronised.
I apologise if I came across as being patronising, but as I said, a lot of this was previously discussed, and if Councillor Munro wishes a private briefing from the officers to bring her up to speed, that is more than happy to be arranged.
Thank you, Convener. The issue isn't a private discussion with me, it's a public discussion with the traders, because the reason we have the challenge with Bowness community is because they don't feel sufficiently engaged. And I would hate that the Falkirk community, particularly the businesses, didn't feel engaged either.
And I can assure you that the businesses do feel engaged. It's they're actually driving this, not us. Okay, in which, sorry, Councillor Reid.
Yes, I think the meeting on Friday was as described, but I think first meetings of any group tend to take that shape. You have a lot of talk and little action. It was unfortunate, but the plan that was given requires to be looked at more closely. And I think if the more members that can be involved, the better in that. But certainly those present seem to accept the action plan unanimously. Will this funding attract any other funding? You know, will it act as...
There is some additional funding, as you will note, particularly for within the Falkirk areas. There's some matched funding from Abellio about improving rail access at Grimston Station. Right. And there may well be other additional funds in here that will attract further funding. Don't know whether Pete or Rona would wish to comment on that.
I mean, the thrust of the projects set out for Falkirk and specifically for Grangemouth are preparing to have to be bid ready for when funds are released. It is slightly disappointing that this funding has been announced out of kilter with maybe other funding that will come from other third-party providers. So it's about being ready and shelf ready to then submit into that funding. Because that, you know, a Heritage Lottery Fund scheme, for example, that can take 2 years' worth of preparation and advance work. Conservation Area Regeneration Scheme with Historic Environment Scotland is slightly less. But if we're to look at the opportunity to draw down heritage funding, for example, then we've got to have a conservation audit in place, and Grangemouth currently doesn't have that. So having that in place and ready means that we're prepared for when this funding gets released.
There's a 30th grant for public art, and either it says High Street and Graham's Road, but you'll recall when the THI for the church was underway, the church area, there was a proposal to have a statue representing Robert Burns paying homage at the Sir John de Graham monument, which for some reason was scrapped. Although the sculptor had prepared drawings and such like. Would there be any chance of that being resurrected? Because that churchyard has, as you know, the artefacts from both the Wars of Independence and the Jacobite Rebellion. It has the cross for the Men of Bute. It should be a big tourist attraction, and Burns is big tourist attraction. So is that one on your list?
Believe it or not, that project was over 10 years ago.
It was, indeed.
And it wasn't actually part of the Townscape Heritage Initiative. That was similar funding we got from Scottish Government then to look at doing town centre regeneration funds. So we invested that in the churchyard to make it more accessible and to improve the environment, as well as putting town centre signage in. I can't quite recall, as we reach the 11th hour, of the expenditure of that funds, the project regarding the statue came to the fore. I think there were some comments around that with regard to the council and or the cultural heritage policy that exists, and I think it would need to be considered in that context.
It was pulled by someone on the trust, I think.
That may well be the case.
To put it in cruder terms.
I think with regard to public art, the opportunity has been much more one around lighting and lighting opportunities for the town centre. And we see some significant buildings where there are some quite attractive lighting installations put on the buildings that then become in themselves almost like an attraction. For example, Kelvin Grove Museum, I know we don't have something the size of that in the town centre, but something like that is a footfall driver for people to come and visit. So we've not quite bottomed that out yet, and we'll certainly finalise what that may or may not look like.
All right. So I take it members confident with such suggestions as those I've mentioned? Yeah?
Yes, I think certainly for the Falkirk businesses and Falkirk Town Centre members, yes, absolutely.
Right. It's just that I think there will be money available from the various Burns clubs in Falkirk as well. I think you might be surprised how much support that would attract.
I think we are very grateful for the support we've already received from Burns Club. So we look at the restoration of the Burns plaque on the High Street as part of the THI, which is what we did do, where that plaque that sits on the side of the building was fully restored and regilded. So I think there's a broader consultation that will have to happen around that, but I think happy to speak to anyone that wants to offer up any additional match funding.
I hate to pursue the point further, but the work has already been done in terms of the sculpture plan and everything. Yeah. So it's almost ready to go, I would think.
This was 10 years ago, and the stone sculpture was Gardner Malloy. So I really don't know where things have been at in terms of that project from over 10 years ago. And I think we would certainly need to go through a consultation with regard to the council's policy in terms of public art, and that would have to go through that consultation.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds like a policy that should be ignored on occasions.
Okay, any other member? Councillor Bissett?
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Just on the Grangemouth allocation, demolition of long-standing vacant and unlettable commercial assets. So when had the consultation with the people at Grangemouth, was there any other ideas that came forward for spending the £250,000 other than just knocking down some buildings?
There was a fairly extensive consultation exercise through the Making Places work, and that reported back some weeks ago now. There was a public event to report back in that report. So there's an extensive report being done, and it was a very heavily influenced. Well, it was driven and drawn up by the community there. But that was one of the things that came out very strongly from that report, is that there are buildings that should go. And we've also, as I mentioned before, we have to fix on things that we can have committed and delivered relatively quickly. So of the long list of things that have come out of the Revitalise Falkirk exercise, the long list of things that have come out of the Grangemouth Making Places exercise, these are the things that meet the criteria for being included as a priority by communities and also being deliverable within the timescales.
So we've allocated this funding, we've committed to this, but is there any opportunity to any flex in it that you could change things?
Well, this list was the list that was approved by members in June, just to remind you. So we've gone away and done work on this based on that list. And I think that obviously we have to have a programme of work. We have to commit to this. And if there was to be a requirement to change that for any reason, we'll obviously come back to members and members can make a decision on any changes that are requested.
Thank you.
I think the key point is that if we don't approve the works just now, there's a delay, then there is a risk of us not being able to secure this funding and actually be able to spend it as the criteria that was given to us. Okay, we're happy to agree? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Item 16 is transport projects, acquisition of land for the Denny Eastern Access Road. Dear Mrs Geisler.
Me again. This is a fairly lengthy report, and given comments made earlier in the meeting, my apologies for that. But because I'm asking members to agree to potentially the promotion of compulsory purchase order, there is a requirement for me to provide background information to members as part of this report. However, there's no real need to go through this in significant detail. I think members are familiar with the project, the fact that it's been included as part of our local development planning process for some time, the fact that some of the southern stretch of the road has been completed by the council. The southern stretch has been completed as part of a housing development, and there's another stretch of the road that's been completed by the council, providing access to the relatively new secondary school. So there's a part in the middle of the project that requires to be delivered, and members have agreed that this would be funded through our capital programme some time ago. Now, since then, we've been in active negotiations with the landowner here, Calendar Estates, and things have moved on. However, they're not moving on as quickly as we would hope. However, I would stress that we are still speaking to Calendar Estates, and they still have made a commitment to work with us in terms of delivering this project without the need for a CPO. However, this is really just as a precaution. I require to have the authority from members to pursue CPO in the event that we're not able to move this project forward as quickly as we would like, and really that's all I'm asking for today, is authority to do that if that's in fact necessary.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Geisler. Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Mrs. Geisler, once again. This is a report I honestly hope we'd never see before us. I had hoped that we, Falkirk Council and Calendar Estates, the landowners, would have come to a mutual agreement regarding the land acquisitions required to progress with this much-needed infrastructure for the residents of Denny and surrounding area. Unfortunately, after many meetings, emails and phone calls, this has not been the case, and we are now left with, in my opinion, no option but to go down the route of CPO, compulsory purchase order, to enable us to deliver our manifesto commitment. In order for CPO to be sought, we as a council must establish whether the public benefits of acquiring the land outweigh the private interests, and that there is no other alternative way to realise its objective. The continued growth in housing building in my ward contained within the local development plan and resultant impacts on traffic congestion at Denny Cross means we need to improve and provide a robust traffic network solution. These new housing developments currently underway and with more proposed developments in the area mean that the DEAR solution is the only viable way and is needed more than ever and as soon as possible to address these issues. The main benefits of DEAR are in easing congestion at Denny Cross, obviously, and facilitating the strategic growth in the area and allowing other development sites to be brought forward. As a consequence of reducing congestion at Denny Cross, there will also be improvements in air quality and road safety. The combination of Denny Town Centre regeneration and DEAR will benefit the local economy by making Denny Town Centre an easier, more attractive place to visit for local shops and services to attract investment. The delays we experience every single day at Denny Cross are beyond a joke, and any slight change to the sequencing, driver error or incident in the M80 at this overcapacity junction cause extremely lengthy tailbacks. I had wished that DEAR would be halfway through completion by now, but we have tried to reach agreement. But given the information held in this report, it is, in my opinion, a clear case that in the public interest, we need to use CPO powers to acquire this land without any more delay and deliver DEAR for the people of Denny, Dunnipace, Fancon, Stonywood and Denlin Head. Thank you, Convener. I'm happy to move the report.
Thank you.
Happy to
Councillor Garner.
second.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Just to say that I support all that my colleague Councillor Garner said. I think it is disappointing given how long the DEAR has been on the stocks, and Calendar Estates should have been well aware of that they haven't thought fit to negotiate on an issue which, as Councillor Garner clearly points out, is to the benefit of many thousands of residents in the Denny, Dunnipace, Banknock, etc. area. So I fully support this proposal.
Thank you. We hope that we don't have to invoke it and we can come to a satisfactory agreement, but I think it's something to have in our armoury if we need to. Councillor Bissett.
Thank you, Convener. I'm just wondering if we'll still be getting the developer's contribution for the DEAR, and if not, what would be the impact on revenue costs to the council?
I'll ask Mrs. Geisler to come
Should
in
we have to
on
borrow
that.
the money?
The funding for this project is included in the capital programme, and that was a decision that members took last year's budget, I think. But there is an SPG, a supplementary planning guidance relating to DEAR, where we will endeavour to recover contributions from developers. I think there was, in fact, I know there was something included in the report about this previously to say that there is a risk of challenge there, but there's always a risk of challenge. and we would just be dealing with that as and when that challenge arose. However, it is our intention to continue to seek contributions from developers, but they may well be retrospective rather than upfront, which was causing the delay, if you recall, before, because we would have had to have waited until we got all the funding in before we could commit to the build. But this will be the council's front funding the development, and we will seek these contributions potentially after the road has been completed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other members? No. Can we agree report?
Thanks. Good afternoon. Hopefully you've had a chance to read through the report. I just plan to pull out a couple of themes and then be happy to take any questions. As you'll probably be aware, the Unison Ethical Charter has been around for a number of years. It was first published in 2012. And really today I'm just going to give you an update on the progress in relation to the Health and Social Care Partnership implementing that. The Charter has been reviewed by the Joint Staff Forum on a number of occasions, and I guess our implementation of the Charter has been in partnership with the trade unions and the wider workforce. The key findings from Unison, I guess at the time they were looking at care quality across Scotland and indeed the wider United Kingdom, they looked specifically at home carers and their terms and conditions. And at that time there was real recognition that actually the home carers were really, I guess, devalued within society. Their view was that they were quite often paid the very basic minimum wage, and they worked extremely long hours and they had relatively poor conditions. Home carers quite often travel from service user to service user to provide care, and back in 2012 very few, particularly external providers, paid travel time. And that meant that workers had to work extremely long hours to make a living. Other things that were highlighted were a real lack of training. There was not much investment in training the workforce. They got basic inductions and they were pretty much left to get on with the job in a lot of cases. There was also, I guess, a sense around real inconsistency in service delivery. Partly due to that requirement to meet multiple service users, carers quite often left as soon as they delivered care and they moved on to the next visit. That inconsistency in practice, I guess, because people weren't really being rewarded appropriately or recognised for their contribution, and they quite often left the caring profession for quite often better paid jobs. And that led to real inconsistency in terms of the quality of care and in terms of care delivery. You've probably all heard cases where people have reported to having 3 or 4 different carers, quite often within a day, and that was because of that inconsistency. So Unison put forward the Charter really to address a lot of these, and I just want to update you in relation to our progress in Falkirk. To date, we have made significant progress in implementing not only the recommendations but the principles of the Charter. We've also made significant progress in terms of implementing, I guess, the new health and social care standards and really focused on, I guess, workforce development and improved outcomes for our service users. All our home carers are paid travel time between appointments. External providers are paid an encompassing rate, which includes travel time as well, and we encourage them to, I guess, fund their staff in the same way that we do. Sickness benefit are available in line with national conditions for all our staff. 0 hours contracts are not used in Falkirk, and we have worked with providers to promote not just the living wage, not just the minimum wage, but the living wage for their staff. We also engage with providers in terms of training and development. We're really committed to developing the social care workforce across the whole sector, and we provide a lot of training opportunities, not just for our in-house staff, but also for external providers, so that we can ensure that our staff have the skills necessary to deliver the job that we're asking them to do. And that's a really important job that goes in and works with our most vulnerable people. It's really important that we can build consistency in where possible. Within the Falkirk Home Care Service, we have just moved to 3 localities. The idea around those 3 localities is that we can provide more consistent care within each of those localities. So our home carers work on a much smaller patch so that people can get used to the carers going in day after day without that change that was reported back in 2012. And indeed, up until quite recently, the demands on the service meant that people were seeing quite often multiple carers. That should reduce significantly now that we've moved to localities and we've begun to invest in more up-to-date ways of directing the workforce. All our staff have now been issued with mobile phones, and we use real-time monitoring to check that people are consistently turning up on time and that carers are consistent in terms of the service they provide. The one area that we haven't implemented in the Unison Ethical Charter was the issue around 15-minute visits. And that was a big issue because what was found back in 2012 when budget cuts hit, lots of authorities moved to put in minimal levels of care. And quite often that was 15-minute visits. And what they found were an abundance of authorities and providers were actually putting in more 15-minute calls than anything else. And the Unison drive really was to do away with those 15-minute calls, because their view was how much care and support can you provide in 15 minutes if you're going in to perform a social care task. So if you're going in to help somebody eat, how can you help them to eat, help them to go to the toilet, and engage with them effectively in a 15-minute visit. So we spent a lot of time focusing on that. The health and social care standards highlight that care should reflect the person's need and that it should be agreed in partnership with the person. And that's very much what we do in Falkirk. We do have some 15-minute visits, but they tend to be to prompt people for medication, to remind them to take it. And those visits are agreed with families and agreed with the service users as being the right thing for people. So whilst we've embedded the principles of the Unison Ethical Charter, we're also working really hard to embed the principles of the National Health and Social Care Standards and ensure that all the care that we provide reflects the needs of the person and that they're agreed in partnership with the person. We've got a bit of work to do because the ongoing development and training of the workforce is an ongoing thing. We're really keen that we have the most trained workforce in terms of social care that we can possibly have. We're really keen that we develop career progression pathways so that we don't lose social care staff to some of the better paid professions, that we actually provide people an opportunity to go on and develop in their careers, and that's the work that we're taking forward over the next couple of years. As I said, we do work regularly with the trade unions. This is a constant agenda item at the Joint Staff Forums, and we have established a social care, home care working group that actually looks at the model of home care across the whole sector. The next bit of work that we're doing in that group, which reports at the end of this month, is around the model of home care for Falkirk Council. At the minute, we don't define well enough what our home care staff should do, and that creates some issues with the external market because we both do bits of the same. What we're really keen to do is really focus on that training and development and be very clear around the expectations of our internal workforce and the external market so that we can complement each other, so that we can focus on the training and development of both organisations to upskill the workforce so that we can go on to provide the best quality of care possible. I hope that is enough of an introduction to the standards and the Ethical Care Charter. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Colley, as portfolio holder, isn't able to be here today. However, she asked me to move the report on her behalf, and in doing so, to highlight that Falkirk Council has been implementing the Ethical Care Charter. This is not something that's new, it's something that has been developed over the last couple of years. It's a work in progress, as it will always be, and I think Martin's articulated very clearly that because of the turnover of staff and the change in the national care standards, that this will be something that is ongoing, and we've used that to inform our practice and indeed upskill our workforce and to deliver the best quality home care that we can. Falkirk didn't use 15-minute visits in the way that other councils use 15-minute visits, but there is a recognition that in some cases the 15 minutes are appropriate, whether it be for medication prompt or just personal care, that's required, but that is discussed and arranged with the individual and their families on that individual person-centred basis. And going forward. So I'm really pleased to have the confirmation that we have been complying and indeed implementing the Ethical Care Charter and going forward, and that is as of a benefit to both our staff and to our service users. So I'm happy to move the report. Councillor Garner.
Happy to second.
Councillor Bissett.
Thank you, Convener. I'd just like to thank Martin for that very comprehensive report. And I'm glad to see that Labour's motion asking for the Charter to be fully implemented almost coming to fruition. And I look forward to the next update. And I would like to thank Unison for their national campaign and bringing this Charter to the forefront. Thank you.
Could I ask, what makes a private provider able to employ staff that we can't? I mean, they surely cannot be offering better conditions of service, so what's the attraction?
Sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't quite hear it.
You said in your presentation that you don't want staff to leave the council to join private provider, but sometimes they can offer better payment, I would think, but surely not better conditions of service.
We quite often lose staff to other professions. In fact, for a while, a lot of home care staff were actually going to work in shops because they were better paid. We don't find that in Falkirk. I haven't seen that here. We are quite effective at retaining our workforce. The last I heard, we only had, I think it was 24 vacant posts, which given the size of the service is actually quite remarkable. But I am really keen that we develop career opportunities for staff so that staff don't leave to something that's slightly better paid. There's no reason that we shouldn't be engaging with the local college, for example, to get people that are doing their health and social care qualifications and get them into these roles. We should be able to develop workers over time to actually progress in their careers. There are lots of opportunities now that we have the strong partnership with health, that we have that health and social care partnership. Historically, we always found that home care was really difficult to recruit to when the NHS was recruiting, because for some reason that was seen as a more attractive career. That's not the case now, because we can share those opportunities in terms of, I guess, longer term employment. And I guess for me, as head of integration within that partnership, I'm really keen that we develop that real progression pathway so that somebody can leave college, come and work for us as a home carer, and then go on to something else, whether that's to train as a social worker or an occupational therapist, or indeed a career within the NHS. There's no reason that we shouldn't be able to support staff to do that. It will help drive up the quality of care, and it will really help us to retain our skilled, trained workforce. And that's really my ambition and the ambition of the partnership. So we haven't seen staff leave in the numbers that other areas have, but the fact we have 24 vacant posts isn't great. We have to constantly run an ongoing recruitment programme to fill those posts. Our home care workforce is an ageing workforce as well, so it's really important that we actively recruit so that we don't have any gaps in service, and as I said, we can build a career progression pathway for people coming brand new into the profession. There are relatively low numbers of young carers, and we need to change that given the demographics that we have. But we're up for it, and we are really beginning to make progress in relation to that. And we have begun to make some progress in defining that career progression pathway. I have a meeting soon with the head of the college to talk around how can we do that in partnership. But we are really optimistic for the future. And as the Chair said, Falkirk is already in a good place, so we can only improve.
So to turn my question on its head, how do they make a profit?
How do providers make a profit?
Yes, if they're paying the same conditions of service and...
With difficulty. I guess the more business they take, the more of a profit they'll make, but their margins are quite tight. I mean, nationally, home care is not recognised as being, I guess, a lucrative profession for anyone. The money's not in it. The fact that we are committed to paying the living wage and above is quite rare. Council staff tend to have really good terms and conditions, and we have to build on that to ensure that we keep the workforce. Some areas that have outsourced home care services large scale have actually reached a point where they're having to bring them back in because the private market, particularly in the south of the border, is really struggling. My last authority, they paid about £11 an hour, and how they managed to pay staff the living wage just really surprised me. But what we saw there were a lot of businesses struggling to survive. We have less of an issue here because actually we pay providers quite well. We pay them well above the living wage so they can in turn pay their staff the living wage and still make a profit. And that's why in Falkirk providers are really keen to work with us in terms of developing the workforce. So it is in a really good place. We just have to build on that and carry on building on that.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. Martin, we currently spend millions of pounds on external home care providers every year. How do we ensure that they don't operate zero-hours contracts? Because I know in the past the majority of them did.
Those providers are regularly monitored by our procurement team and our commissioning team, and they check the employees' terms and conditions. They check that staff are being appropriately trained as well. As I mentioned earlier, we're doing a bit of work around really defining what the in-house and the external providers do, because at the minute they all provide pretty much the same thing. We're in discussion with the unions and the workforce around should our staff focus on those really intensive high-cost care packages, should they focus on a reablement model, and should we give the maintenance, I guess the ongoing maintenance contracts to external providers, or would we be better doing that the other way around? At the end of those conversations, what we will have is a really clear model for our in-house service and our external providers. And what that will do is it will enable us to focus our training, our development and our reviewing resources far more effectively. Because if we're asking providers to deliver one specific thing, we'll be able to support them to train their staff and develop the workforce to do that. At the minute, it's a bit of a mix and match. Some providers provide reablement, some provide maintenance, some provide crisis response, as do our in-house services. And to get the best and the most efficiency out of those services, we need to be really clear around our expectations, both in-house and externally, and then help drive up the quality of care, both in-house and externally. So it's a work in progress. The ongoing monitoring is something that we do on a regular basis. We just need to do more of it. And the Care Inspectorate also come in and they review employees' terms and conditions. They look at their learning development and, I guess, their quality of care. What they don't look at, I don't think, is how much they pay them. That's something very much for private providers. However, private providers would soon begin to lose staff if they were paying less than others, and they would lose their staff to us if they were paying significantly less than us. So I don't think that's the case here. There's no evidence to suggest that.
So before a contract's awarded, are we able to insist that they don't operate zero-hours contracts? Because I would have thought they're responsible for managing their own staff and how they deal with them. So how do we deal with that side of things?
Convener, can I assist here? Sorry, but a lot of the contracts I understand are through Scotland Excel. And much like the construction thing earlier on, Scotland Excel set in a number of parameters before any contracts are set up. So I think what you're looking for, Alan, is probably, rather than for here, it's actually Scotland Excel that do that. I know you have some smaller local ones that you deal with, but the vast majority, I think, is actually through Scotland Excel.
There's also through just the procurement process there are conditions that can be put in as part of that process that helps protect the staff in that respect.
It was actually the smaller local providers that I was more interested in. I knew there was an input from Scotland Excel, but it's the small local providers that I was more concerned about, the fact that they used 0 hours contracts and whether we can actually dictate to them that they shouldn't use them before the contract's awarded.
Yeah, I think that's dealt with through the procurement process.
I can find out from our procurement colleagues what steps they have in place, and I can get that to you.
Okay, just to say that I'm really pleased that this has been implemented by Falkirk Council, and it was implemented before Labour brought forward the motion, because it's not something that can be done overnight. It has been in the process for a number of years, and it puts us in the best possible position going forward to deliver a best quality service. I thank Martin for his presentation today. Okay, thank you.